James Beard award-winning chef and culinary creative Dan Barber. And maybe you're lucky enough to know him from a meal at one of his Blue Hill restaurants. Maybe you've watched him as part of the Netflix series Chef's Table while you dined on perhaps a far less elegant meal at home in front of your television. Or perhaps you know him from the initiative that brings him here today, Wasted, his effort to rethink and reuse the food we normally throw away or ignore entirely. He's here with Steve Clemons to talk about one person's trash being another chef's, and I quote, juice, pulp, cheeseburger, and culled chicken broth in the style of pot au feu. That offering is straight from the menu at last year's pop-up event at Blue Hill, where Barber and some of the country's major culinary talents made dinner with ingredients most people would throw away.
Thank you very, very much. You got to come up and moderate. No, just good to see you, my friend. How are you? You're sitting there, so I'm going to move over one. I've been here all morning. I'm hungry. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Let me read you something I read that was staggering and tell me if it's true. Food waste emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, equals all lighting, cars, air travel, washing machines, heating, and air conditioners in this country. So that the food
like that.
Is that about true? I mean, that was something I read in preparation. I mean, it wasn't about you, but that's a staggering figure if that's...
Yeah, no, I didn't.
So I can be wasteful in heating and air conditioning and washing machines and lighting, as long as I get my food waste problem under control?
Yeah, right. It's something 40% of what food we produce it goes to waste. So to me, that encapsulates, the challenge and the opportunity.
You've got the best line of tweets of this morning. I did go through, and you were talking. I saw stuff about spent cocoa husks, sweet and earthy custard. I saw something about skate cartilage fries. Skates are little flat things that swim in the ocean.
But this is the bones of the skate cartilage.
Bone, yeah, and then there was...
After you remove the fillet.
Pork marinated in malt rootlets, which are germinated rootlets of a grain formed during molting and later discorded. So you're getting an echo effect here this morning from your tweets. So
well, thank you.
How did you become this person that became so interested in it? Because you're basically talking about the science here of food waste and taking it to a very new dimension.
I'll push back on that just a little bit. I'm talking about the pleasure.
I'm just a regular guy.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right. I'm about hedonism. I don't know anything about science. So I stay away from that. I'm just looking at it I'm actually looking at it from what chefs do every day in their kitchens, which is utilize waste. The DNA of a chef is to not throw away food. There's an economic driver there. There's a moral imperative. And there's also just the delicious.
How many chefs have that DNA?
Everyone, anybody who does, they just don't wear it on their sleeve like I do. Mm-hmm. Like we did for this project. It was essentially to say, when tonight you're going to go to a restaurant, you're going to order the ravioli special. Well, that's vegetables that are left over from yesterday. It's braised meat. That's probably left over from yesterday. It's mixed together with beautiful cheese. It's formed into a ravioli, and it's called the ravioli special. It's not called a wasted dish. It's called ravioli special. But, so we don't wear it on our sleeve. We hide it. Otherwise, no one would buy it, right? And so what we did with this project is say, instead of doing that, we're going to wear it on our sleeve and advertise the fact that chefs, especially high-end chefs, white tablecloth restaurant chefs that are often accused for pretension and waste, are not the cause of a problem, but they're actually part of the solution. A big part of the solution, because we create a culture around eating this stuff.
So, which is great, and I've dug into this. It's fascinating what you're doing.
And you said you were reading up on it in preparation. So thank you.
Everyone, I hope, gets an opportunity. Are you doing cookbook? How do you inculcate a world of people that sort of think that this is exotic and weird? I mean, you're up here this morning talking to us because this is so unusual in a way. How do you make what you're doing usual?
Yeah, well, that's the challenge, isn't it? I mean, look back at the history of cuisines, and you see that all the great dishes that we love to eat today are in some way based on utilization of waste. I mean, I just sort of off the cuff, you have for French cuisine, which people, again, associate with hedonism and pretension. French cuisine is a peasant cuisine. Look at the three dishes off the cuff again. Pâte au feu. Pâte au feu is leftover vegetables with scraps of meat. A bouillabaisse. A bouillabaisse was the fish that the fishermen couldn't sell. It was the wives got that damaged fish, the uncoveted fish, and made a beautiful soup at the dock, and the husbands went off to sell the fish that they caught that morning. Coq au vin. Coq au vin is a great. Coq au vin is a leathery, tough rooster. Anyone ever had a rooster? You don't, because we serve it. Actually, we serve it to dog food. We give it to fish for fish feed, and Campbell's soup takes a little bit of the male chickens, but it is a very tough, leathery chicken because it hasn't been bred for us to eat. And so, what did the French do? Instead of throwing it away, they braised it very gently in white wine. The acid breaks down the meat, and you get this iconic French's. Well, there's 3 as the basis for French's. There's hundreds. Chinese, Cantonese cuisine, it's the entirety of the cuisine, Italian cuisine. So the question is, how do we begin to not talk about this as we're wasting 40% of the food we produce, but here are dishes that are so delicious they become...
Is there a wasted cookbook cuisine? Or wasted cuisine
If you have a proposal, I'd love to...
we have some agents watching
in
right
the crowd.
now.
Okay, good.
But I mean, that requires me, because someone like myself, and I have to admit that I'm a pretty crappy cook. I just don't cook. Yeah. So if I tried, I would worry I would kill myself because I wouldn't know what would be healthy and what not. But are there? You said you're not a scientist, but are there dangers in the kinds of things? I mean, I would not know that I could eat spent cocoa husks.
Yeah.
But are there things
Neither
out there?
did I till we tried. Yeah, there are probably things out there that we're not towing that line so closely. We're really, this isn't meant to be danger eating, adventure eating. It's meant to be just delicious.
So if you go out of the fancy restaurant world into schools, into large consumers of food, what are the kinds of things you think they can do? And more importantly, because we've had a lot of policy people on stage this morning thinking about business people, what do you think a city like the city of New York can do to help make your mission easier?
Well, the power of the potential of utilization of waste, obviously, in a city like New York is enormous. But I would just backtrack and say, what you're talking about is down the line. Where does it start? Okay. Where do these ideas start? Where do you create the dishes to begin with, and the culture around utilization of everything that's produced on a farm or in a kitchen? And I think that starts today anyway, whereas dialing back to those cuisines, it started in peasant homes out of desperation, really, because you had no other choice. You couldn't open the Wasted Project that we opened at Blue Hill 200 years ago because that would be crazy. It doesn't make sense, right? And so it's the irony is that we have the luxury to open a Wasted. That's one way to look at it. The other is that I think the way to create change, and which is to bleed this into the culture, to inculcate it into everyday eating habits, which ultimately become part of school programs and municipality usage and the rest, is to start on high. It sounds trickle down, and I don't mean that in the Republican sense. I mean it I'm a bottom-up guy, but some of these things start up.
Like you need a good cooking show.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
but
no, you don't. I think you need more chefs to be out there wearing it on their sleeve more than they do now. And like I said, it's hidden, and we needn't be. So can we can I flash one of the dishes on the screen? Because we brought a picture of. That's an example of a producer that is in Queens that. Has a side business for prepping vegetables. This is, peeling carrots and
what are we looking at?
So you're looking at the waste from that operation. In other words, a restaurant might order
waste of
celery. Might order a bag of sliced carrots, and the peelings will go through a chute on the ceiling. And then out into a dumpster. So you're looking at all the scraps of these vegetables. There's probably 30 different varieties of vegetables here that are all put together in a bin, and that bin is then taken to a dumpster. It is a dumpster, and it's taken actually.
You probably salivate looking at that, right?
Well, let's do the next slide because that's what it became. A dumpster dive salad.
Wow.
Which was very easy to put together. The vegetables are delicious. We served it with the little foam, if you can see that on the top end of that plate. That's the water from chickpeas. So when you open a can of chickpeas, you drain out the chickpeas. So we took that water and whipped it with little salt and lemon juice, and because of the protein from the chickpeas, it whips into a foam. It's a mousse. And it's delicious. And so the fat with the vegetables created a nice little salad. Can I do another one?
Tomorrow. She's into chickpeas.
Yeah.
And
so here's one where you could look at sort of the culture of the times, let's say. I mean, everyone is getting their juices in the morning, right, at liquidaria. Well, we have a liquidaria across the street from Blue Hill. And we were walking by, we were saying, well, what happens?
Smoothie pie
Yeah, well, what happens with all the leftover pulp from the juicing process?
Huh.
And so we created a burger out of the pulp that's left in the machine after the juicing process. And it's a 100% vegetable burger. It's got 4 different types of celery, celery, carrot, celery root, and beet pulp.
And does it really taste good or only look good?
Well, no, it's delicious.
Yeah,
It actually it tastes a little bit like a beef burger, in part because it looks like a rare burger. But it's delicious. The bun is made out of day-old bread. The beets are made out of wasted beets that are otherwise thrown away, damaged beets. And the pickles, there's a term in the pickle business called pickle butts. Those are the ends of the cucumbers that aren't put into the jar because you wouldn't want to look at a jar and see the end of it, right? It doesn't look perfect. So there's an interesting term for this, pickle butts, and they're tossed away. So we contacted the pickling operation in upstate New York, and they sent us all their pickle butts, and we served delicious pickles. So there you have. So it's a little clever, witty, whatever. But really, it's
on your
based
mailing
on
list.
Yeah.
So you did a pop-up at Blue Hill that showed and showcased a lot of this, and it was interesting to me that you've also partnered with Sweet Green and Shake Shack. I don't know what would be left over from Shake Shack, but I'm really interested.
Well, no, we did the wasted burger.
Oh, that was the wasted burger there,
yeah.
And I guess the question is, how do you, given your experience with this and what it takes, how do you take this to scale? How do you begin moving this into other communities that may not be exposed? And again, I want to come back to the question which you avoided in a crafty way. What do you need, or what would you like to see from people who are in control of cities like this do to give a push to what you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, first, the example of Sweet Greens and Shake Shack would be an example of that trickle down. I mean, that ends up, an idea that started in our kitchens ends up being available to a large group of people at an affordable price. So to me, that's it working.
What would that cost?
I don't know what Shake Shack charged.
They
My
charge a
brother
lot
is here.
for
Do you know,
things
remember
that
what
aren't.
$6. Yeah.
They charge a lot for things. That's cheaper than their normal stuff. So that's interesting.
Instead of serving at Shake Shack, my dream would be in New York to take the liquidaria, approach them and say, keep doing your juices, but have a kiosk with a burger for lunch. So if you want your juice, I don't know why everyone wants juice. I don't think our bodies are built to drink that much juice. But you can have your juice, but if you're going to have your juice, you have to eat your vegetable pulp. And again, that goes back to the history of how we developed cuisines and how we developed diets was based on if you wanted your rice in Japan, well, you got your rice, but you had to eat buckwheat because buckwheat was a rotation crop into rice. And if you weren't using chemical agriculture then, you were using rotation crops. You had to grow buckwheat, which is a beautiful crop to grow in Japan and for that soil type. And so what did you do with the buckwheat? Well, here in this country, we grow buckwheat as a soil amendment crop and we put it into dog food again. But they created soba noodles. So your culture becomes you eat your soba noodles to also eat your rice, but it isn't said by a chef pointing his finger, you have to eat this, right? It's said because it's done because
the state of Maryland manufactures or produces a massive number of chickens. And so there are massive numbers of chicken feet that are left over, and they export them to China.
Yeah.
It's a huge, huge business for the state of Maryland. People don't talk about much, but
the legs go to Russia.
What's that?
And the legs go to Russia.
The legs go to Russia?
Yeah. Well,
why?
we eat much more white meat than we do dark meat. So they call them Bush's legs because it was part of Bush's push through the second George W. Bush pushed through legislation that allowed a very cheap export of these chicken legs because we don't have the culture to eat chicken. We eat, I think, 3 times the amount of white meat in this country as we do dark meat.
Again, one of the questions I've asked all of the panelists this morning is what's going on in the international scene. Yeah. Do you see anyone out there in the international front kind of doing and replicating what you're doing? Yeah,
traditional cuisines. Again, I think it soaks up everything. We haven't, and unfortunately people are moving away from that because we're moving more and more towards the Western diet, which we're exporting these ideas, which is crazy. I mean, we talk a lot about the low-hanging fruit of these damaged fruits and vegetables or the food we leave on our plates.
So your answer is just don't become modern.
Well, my answer is change your diet. Change your diet. I mean, instead of talking about how wasteful Americans are, we should look at our everyday eating habits. When 120 million acres is planted to corn, and we eat less than 1% of that directly. The other 99% either goes into our gas tanks, goes into plastic, or goes to feed cows, which is an extremely inefficient way to use 120 million acres. We ought to look at that as the definition of waste and start there. Too much of our conversation is focused on what we leave on our plates, which is important, and I just don't think that conversation lasts longer than our conversation.
I want to open to the floor. I really don't want to. I'd rather just keep talking. But I am going to open to the floor. But real quick, are you teaching any classes about this at universities? Are there cooking schools that are coming in? It's fascinating until I read up until I heard you were going to join us this morning. I didn't know about it. Now I've been Googling, and there's a lot out there. But again, the question for me is, how do you inject into the bloodstream the kinds of things you're doing so that they can go viral?
Make it delicious and hedonistic. To me, that's my opinion, but one of the failings of any movement is that it's just hard to do, and trends come and go, and fads are here and then they're gone. Look at the environmental movement. It asks you to take away something in your lives to get to a kind of fulfillment or what we need to do for the future. Well, this movement is about hedonism, A to Z, and it requires you actually to be greedy. Just greedy for the kinds of things that are delicious and truly delicious, not fake delicious, truly delicious. And to curate that, I think chefs can play a role.
I did tweet this morning that I was very excited about interviewing the world's best chef of food waste. And now you can ask a question. Yes, this gentleman right here.
My name is Alex Ulam. Instead of recycling food, couldn't you achieve much better energy savings and less greenhouse gas emissions by eating food locally and also switching to more vegetarian diet? I mean, so much of our food comes from California, where we're running out of water, and I mean, so you're recycling waste, but what about?
So the question is his utopian path better than yours?
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's everything. That the movement of local eating, the move of farm-to-table cooking, that is very much part of the mainstream gastronomic culture, and increasingly in terms of everyday eaters. That idea has become, I think, a part of our trend and goals for good eating. And so it's been talked about a lot. What I think has been talked about less is how do we utilize local purveyors in a way that takes into account their entirety of their farm. For example, you support local wheat. Dialing back to that Japanese example with rice and buckwheat. Well, there's organic farmers all in upstate New York. They're growing organically. They're forced into rotations. They're forced into, for wheat farmers up there, they're forced into growing barley. They're forced into growing buckwheat and rye. But we don't eat rye and barley and buckwheat. And so those go into bag feed for pigs. Well, that's another definition of waste. It's extremely inefficient. And to your point, to eat a pig in that way is a very inefficient use of our resources. If we ate more rye and we ate more barley and we ate more buckwheat, we'd feed a hell of a lot more people, and we'd do it very deliciously and healthfully.
I should point out that one of our senior editors at The Atlantic, Corby Kummer, writes a lot about that subject. So refer folks to The Atlantic. It's one of his favorites. He's been one of the great chroniclers of this movement. Yes, right back here.
You're right. I've learned a lot from Corby.
Yeah, Corby's wonderful and it's fun. He should be.
Hi, I'm Jeff Demansky. I'm with IBTS, the Institute for Building Technology and Safety. And I got a very quick, short question, but I'm just going to follow on from our last conversation about how we get these ideas out there. Mm-hmm. And we talk a lot about technology, and just a couple of things to point out that's very exciting. And to your point, that there's so much effort, there's so much progress in behavioral science versus the technologies of buildings. For two examples, LEED is now trying to incorporate a credit for behavior-based strategies. Mm-hmm. And a very exciting bit of news from September of last year, President Obama executive order required that federal agencies use cognitive and behavioral science strategies in the design of programs. So relevant for everything we're talking about. Now the quick question is another alternative utopia, but you didn't talk about compost as a strategy. I know New York City is very big on this for a new commercial composting program. So curious about the dynamic of eating it versus just composting it.
Compost politics.
Yeah, so the potential, again, of a city that produces so much waste to create a program that allows that waste to be utilized in upstate farms and farms outside the city for compost is very important, and the potential just is I'm more interested, though, while I see the value of compost. We work right next to a farm that uses a tremendous amount of compost. Right. I see the value of it. I also see the value of soil health, because the compost, just adding compost to soil that's depleted doesn't really work. And so what you need are the right rotations that I was talking about before with compost. So you need a combination of these soil-supporting crops for which we don't eat, which are not a part of our diet. We need to make them a part of our diet, and then the waste that we produce, the compostable waste, needs to be added to that soil. To me, that's the true sustainability of a food system.
I'm going to go right here to this lady in the center. You get the final question.
Evelyn Cantor, I'm an environmental journalist. How do you align recycling food with the stringent food safety regulations? Let's talk supermarkets for a moment. New York City has one of the strongest food safety regulations with expiration dates, sell-by dates. How do you convince people to go past those dates that the food is still really good?
Yeah, no, there are a lot of people working on that, and there's some dials changing. I mean, the culture of that is changing because more writers are writing about it, more people are talking about it. It's crazy, the dairy industry in particular, just to call them out, have these ridiculous sell-by dates that allow people that encourage people to throw away more food. And I think that's changing. I think in the next phase of this is to look at legislation. But I don't know that it starts with legislation. I think it starts with an understanding and a movement by people that are demanding this kind of food. And then that again, trickles down both to the everyday eating habits and then ultimately to the political realm. I don't think it starts on the political realm.
It's a fascinating topic. I had one of the things the Atlantic does and works with Bloomberg Philanthropies and the Aspen Institute, we put on a big forum every year called City Lab. And this last year in London, I had an opportunity with Jamie Oliver, a chef, to talk about West Virginia and food health and whatnot. But if you go into the poorest parts of West Virginia today, there are markets that essentially trade in day of expiration foods. And that's what parts of West Virginia, say in McDowell County, West Virginia, what they can afford. What's interesting is you're inverting that to some degree and say there's opportunity there more than risk.
Yeah, the democratization of this idea, I think, is pretty up there because you don't want this to become an elitist. You don't want to look at expired dairy to go to people who can't afford the full price. It doesn't make any sense. I think what we want to do is create a culture that refuses to waste delicious food. And that has to start on high. That has to start by trends. And for better or for worse, chefs' restaurants have become these culinary centers of cultural centers. And we ought to use that power to explain what we're up to.
Are you going to have other pop-ups?
We're looking at it. We'd like to go.
Am I saying it right, wasted, or is there some emphasis on the WAST?
Waste.
Waste ed.
What's wasted waste education.
Waste
but light
education.
on the education, right? More on the
got
hedonism.
Fascinating. More on the hedonism. Are there going to be more pop-ups?
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's what we're looking at. We're trying to take this to other cities around the world.
And if folks want to learn more, where do they go?
Well, you can go to wasted.com. You can go to our website, bluehillfarm.com, and there's quite a bit of information there. And we send you to other places, too.
So ladies and gentlemen, Dan Barber, chef at
Blue
Hill, founder of Wasted. Follow him on Twitter. It's a very, very interesting. I'm going to try the skate fries, sir.
Yeah, let's do
hey,
that.
good
Thank
to see
you
you,
very
Dan.
much.
Thank you very, very much.